morning, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So this is Shop Talk. Welcome, everyone. Basically, we're kicking back. We're talking. It's Monday. It's 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and just enjoying our time. As far as the us goes, today I have with me the one and only Mike Christensen, who is allowed on Shop Talk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday.
Indeed. Now, other Mike Christensens, you are allowed in chat, but you're never going to be actually brought into Shop Talk. So I just wanted to warn you in advance in case you had your heart set on it.
There is one in the Nordic region that is a race car driver.
Yes. Now, Anders being in chat, his chat being denied, I accept your chat, Anders, even though, historically, I don't know how well that goes. But people don't know this. This is a little known fact. Anders is actually a Nigerian prince, and he received like $30-40 million, but had the proviso that he had to give this money away via email, and unfortunately, he was never able to do it. It was sort of a Brewster's Millions type of situation, but unlike Brewster, he wasn't able to get rid of all the money. That's because everybody just stopped accepting Nigerian prince emails, and as a result, Anders had all this money that he was like, I just need to get rid of this, and it just didn't work. So it's very sad. It was a sad situation for everybody. No one believed I was a Norwegian prince. Well, yeah, I mean, you definitely weren't going to be a Norwegian prince. Who would believe that? Nigerian prince? No, it's perfectly reasonable. Everybody should believe that.
But it wouldn't. I don't know the history of Norway, obviously, but did read that some of the Nordic regions didn't have a lot of prosperity until the modern world because it was hard for them to plant stuff.
Yeah, basically until Norway discovered that they had enormous offshore oil capabilities, it was generally a not very wealthy nation. That's the kind way of putting it.
Yeah, so I mean, probably a lot of princes they just didn't have a lot of money. They just
Maybe. Um, Before the oil, we just had taxes, right? Uh, but now they are an incredibly successful petro state, so they've got that going for them. Okay. Um, with that, we're going to talk about some SQL Server related things because since the last time we all got together, a couple of things have happened. Mind you, the last time we had Shop Talk was the day before Pass Summit and Ignite. So I expected for the past, 6, 8, 9, 11 months that SQL Server 2025 was going to come out Pass Summit and Ignite. And it turns out that it was. It did come out. It was one of the big announcements. Anders became a Postgres convert. I actually want to hear about that a little bit, Anders, especially because one of the topics after this is Pass Summit. So I'm assuming it's Pass Summit related. But in the meantime, I do want to share. I'll just bring something up just to have it be here. We have what's new in SQL Server 2025, and I need to clear out this message box. It is not cooperating very well at the moment, but once it does cooperate, I will paste this one time, and there we go. We have a link. Houston, we have a link. What's new in SQL Server 2025? So this is linking to Anna Hoffman and Bob Ward. It should still be called SQL 2022 AI Edition. There are some nice things in 2025. There actually were several really neat features. One of the big things, this was actually something that I had heard nothing about until they officially announced it. And that is Standard Edition, 32 cores, 256 gigs of RAM in the buffer pool. And that's a big deal because prior to this, Standard Edition was 16, I think it's 24 cores max, and 128 gigs of RAM in the buffer pool. Now, that does not mean you only had 128 gigs of RAM because you also had things like in-memory OLTP. You have things like certain types of caching, addition to buffer pool. You have column store indexes. You have other things that could use memory in addition to the buffer pool. But on a standard edition of SQL Server, not using column store, not using in-memory OLTP, you would cap out at about 130, 131 gigs of RAM. Typically is about the max that you would see the instance using. Again, there are exceptional cases where you could push that beyond. And obviously, if you are taking advantage of all the functionality, you could go above 200 gigs of RAM and be pretty happy about it. This is nice. It does, like Andrew says, it makes Standard Edition a lot more usable for many more loads. And I fully agree, especially Resource Governor is now available in Standard Edition. This was one of the things that really kept Enterprise locked away. And I'm at a point now where I'm not sure, outside of online index rebuilds, I'm not really sure how many other things are going to push you to use Enterprise Edition. And Enterprise Edition is it's like 4 times as expensive as Standard Edition at this point. The prices didn't change at all. So for a lot of workloads, I've seen most of my customers downgrade from Enterprise to Standard Edition. Advanced availability group usage, yeah, that's true. You don't get multi-database availability groups. You're still stuck with the basic availability group, which is essentially database mirroring. But they totally deprecated database mirroring, except that database mirroring is still in the product, and their replacement in basic availability groups is essentially database mirroring. It's a totally different mechanism under the covers that behaves in practice almost exactly the same. Okay. So, yes, if you do have multi-database availability groups, if you do want better management of availability groups, yeah, that's a good use case for Enterprise. You're right, Anders. If you want online index rebuilds, that's the pain point that's remaining, I think. And I also believe, tying in with what Anders was saying earlier around Postgres, I think that Microsoft doing this is 100% tied to Postgres really eating that bottom part of the market. The part of the market where SQL Server was for a long time before it really jumped up to that Oracle space of we're at the top of the market. And basically a lot of companies looked at the pricing model for SQL Server and just said, well, if I'm going to have 70% of SQL Server, after they went to core-based pricing, that was a thing that kept people from buying new SQL Server. But I guess that did incite some of this maneuver, but also the fact that the pricing is so much higher. And in fairness, I think a lot of the companies that make that switch don't realize Postgres is a very different animal that has to operate very differently. You don't manage the databases the same way. You don't optimize queries the same way. The tooling is different. The functionality is different. The SQL is very similar, but there are still differences. And Postgres has a lot of great functionality. It's got a lot of great capability. But if you're expecting a certain workload and a certain throughput, and you just switch it right over to Postgres, and you aren't similarly experienced in Postgres as you were with SQL Server, you are not going to hit that same level of performance. And I think it's fair to say other way around as well, that if you start in Postgres and you spend a lot of time, you're very well experienced in Postgres, and your company just switches to SQL Server, you're not going to hit that same level of performance immediately. So the extension system in Postgres, that is a really great capability. It does enable a lot of open source functionality. SQL Server kind of tried to do something similar with respect to machine learning services and the extensibility there of, well, you can bring in other languages. And the community never really picked up on that. In a lot of cases, even the third language, Java, which really was for Scala, it was for Spark, that didn't really go anywhere. And I know that there were a few people who looked at getting .NET is as part of an extension for the machine learning services. It didn't take off. It doesn't change the underlying core of the product like extensions can. This is true. Yeah. Extensions in Postgres are definitely a very powerful feature. And including things like, spatial data or being able to add in administrative capabilities. Several of the high availability options are in fact extensions. Yeah, time series, make it a time series database. What Microsoft will do is they'll bring in some of this functionality themselves, but they'll do it on their own time scale. Or regular expressions. That, as I recall, that's also a Postgres extension. And we had to wait for regular expressions, which happens to be in 2025. Interestingly, Web Edition is gone. I'm not surprised here. I wonder how many people properly used Web Edition. There are some companies that I'm sure did properly license and use Web Edition, but I'm going to guess that 70 to 80 to 90% of customers who licensed for Web Edition weren't really within the bounds of what Web Edition could do. Technically, yeah, Web Edition was around. It was around until this version. It's gone now.
I just took a quick poll in my room here. It was zero.
Zero Web Edition users.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, so Web Edition, for those who are not familiar, this originally was a version of SQL Server that was intended specifically for public websites. The pricing model is very different. It's much cheaper, but the idea is you're not doing any sort of custom development. You're just sort of putting it on top of .NET Nuke or on PHP bulletin board or some other website, Drupal or something, where it's a database because you need a database, and the main competitors are going to be MySQL and Postgres, so you're not going to want to pay a lot of money. And you're not developing custom code around it. You're just sort of plopping on third-party software package in. Yeah, that's kind of the idea of Web Edition. So it was a much, much less expensive license than even Standard Edition. And it gave you effectively very similar to Standard Edition functionality. So that being gone, not surprised. Not surprised. Express Edition went up to 50 gigs. And so that's actually also extremely useful because Express Edition being totally free, I mean, this really does, I think, eat into some of the Postgres and MySQL market because up until 2022, you could get up to 10 gigabytes of space per database in Express Edition. Now, Express Edition is still very limited. You don't have a SQL agent. You can run batch scripts to execute commands, but you're going to be limited in some of the capabilities. Some of your smaller clients use Express. Right. I've got one consulting client where they use Express Edition for essentially offloading a bunch of warehousing style queries to individual customers. So you have all of the data together in one SQL Server instance, but then you'll have different subsets of data because this is for different factories. So each factory will have its own subset of data in a local machine or another cloud instance that's in their region. And that way they can get to that data, just their own data, and operate off of that versus having to reach into the central warehouse and grab all that data. Welcome in, Millhouse. Good to have you.
That's a pretty good idea to save some money.
Oh yeah, and they had to fight for years around. Well, if we have these indexes in here, and we have to add indexes the appropriate way because if you have them all up front, you're actually going to blow past 10 gigs. But if you do it this way and you make sure you rebuild those indexes at these times, then you could have under 10 gigs and just keep it just about that level. And there were some challenges involved in it, but considering that the difference was free versus several $1,000s per instance per year, they were going to figure out a way to make it free. One of my clients, we used a custom PC running Express in each door. Yeah. And Express Edition definitely is capable. And the fact that it's up to 50 gigabytes of database size, I think makes it very capable. The fact that there's a standard developer edition, I really appreciate, because I am an enterprise edition snob, admittedly, especially when it's not my money. If it's my money, then we got to go standard edition. But if it's not my money, I want enterprise.
That was so weird when we went out to lunch and I paid and you got lobster. I was like, come on, dude.
A few extra lobsters as well. I didn't even eat them. I don't even eat lobster. I just bought them just to buy them, just because. It's on Mike's account. Throw a few more. Throw a few bottles of wine in there too. See a lot of current customers asking for us to get software approved on SQL 2025 due to the increase in Express. Sure, and I think this is certainly a thing that Microsoft is trying to push. I know Brent Ozar had his. Actually, let me see if I can find. He recently had his quarterly review of how many customers of his are on different versions of SQL Server, and I'm going to see if I can find it. The most recent one, that is. But as I'm searching for that, here we go, fall of 2025. Okay, so this one was very recent, and hopefully they don't figure out Postgres. True. Although, again, like I mentioned, Anders, Postgres is really neat, but you really have to understand the product. Otherwise, you're going to make some mistakes and performance is going to be worse. It's not something that you can just pivot right over to and bam, you're good. At some point, people could figure out a lot of it, but as you get medium to high workloads, you really have to understand the product. And again, that's not a knock on Postgres. It's just each of these database platforms is different. If it was Oracle, it's same story. If it's SQL Server, same story. We talk all day about people who just leave the defaults on installation, people who don't know how to configure an instance, people who don't know how to configure indexing strategies on tables. All of that stuff is different. People who write T-SQL in certain ways, they don't know the better ways to do it. And it's the same story of Postgres, except that the specifics are different enough that you can't really take a person who's reasonably familiar with SQL Server and then drop them right into Postgres and expect that they're going to be as proficient. Or vice versa. Okay, this is what I was going to point out is SQL Server versions. So what happened is you kind of see a couple of points. This is specifically Brent Ozar's data for his consulting customers and people who are using the SQL Constant Care. So this is his sample. This is not the overall population. This is a sample that is biased in that particular way. How reflective this is of the overall population, I can't tell you for sure. I expect that they are less cloud-based, more on-premises based than the overall SQL Server customer base, and that they are probably a little bit more queued toward, say, the intermediate versions. I think in the wild, you probably have more very early versions, like 10 years or older, and you have more newer versions. But those are my expectations, and these are his specifics. So just to keep that in mind. But what he saw was increases. It took SQL Server 2022 a while, and knowing that 2025 is now out, I think this probably has hit its peak. I don't know that there's much benefit in going to 2022 at this point. 2017, 2017 is basically like the same story where unless you were focused on SQL Server on Linux, on Python and machine learning services, on uh, containers, I had to think of what the third one was. Or I think distributed availability groups was 2017 as well. But there were very few really important new things that came out in 2017. And you had, if I go back to, this is just
Whoa.
going to 2020, but SQL Server 2016 was a big release. There was a lot of new stuff for database administrators and for T-SQL developers. 2017 came right on the heels. Like it was literally 2 months later that Microsoft said, "Oh, by the way, we've got a new private build for SQL Server 2017 that's going to come out." And I was all in on it because hey, that's SQL Server on Linux. So I was, of course, going to be very jazzed about that. But a lot of people sort of saw that as, well, it's too soon to upgrade. I was in on it because SQL Server on Linux and Python and machine learning services. They accidentally announced SQL 2017 at Summit 2016. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I remember that. I do remember that their first CTP was not too long afterwards. So basically, as soon as people were starting their plans of, okay, let's start getting upgraded to 2016, oh, they've released 2017. Well, we've already got plans for 2016, so we're just going to stick with it. And I think that's what happened. And as you see, 2017, this was as of 2020. So 2017 never really ate into 16's market share. 2019, which is this light green box, did eat into the market share. And 2019 became essentially the replacement for 14 and 16, skipping 17. 2022, and you'll notice as well, it took a good 2 years for 2019 to be significant in Brent's sample. So again, I'm just going to keep hammering home. This is a sample. This is based off of his customers that have their own particularities. So this is, I don't want to claim that this is reflective of the entire market, but it is interesting. And it does fit some of the biases, some of the things that I have seen in the broader market. Is 2022 the tiny blue on top? Yeah, 2022 is this tiny blue. So it came out Q4 of 2022, and it took, what is this, almost 2 years to get 10% share, during which time 2019 was still increasing. You'll notice that 2019's peak was Q1 of 2024. It was a good year plus. It did have some bad press in the beginning. There was a cumulative update in 2022 that got pulled. There were several major breaking updates, things that really, I'm surprised they got through the testing, which is the polite way of saying I don't know how much testing there was on some of this stuff. Because as I recall, I think it was availability groups that broke. Like if you had an availability group and you had compression, I think that combination broke things. It was something where an update just completely borked everything. But anyhow, it's taken until 2025 for us to see SQL Server 2022 make a reasonable headway. So that's 2.5 years. If you look back here, it's somewhere around what 2017's release looks like. So I do expect to see 2025 come out and behave more like 2019 or 2016, where it probably won't be a huge percentage early on, but give it a year and it's going to start taking 30-40% of the total market. May actually be sooner because of some of this stuff that we're talking about. And actually, Brent here even mentions, hey, 2022 wasn't feature complete for a year. Cumulative updates were a mess. Yeah, this was, you know what? This is probably the thing that I was talking about. Broken queries using generic ODBC connector, errors with contained availability groups. incorrect query results. If you have an index that explicitly specifies descending sort order, you have a where filter, and you have an order by on the sort order as the index. So that's not great.
That's terrible.
Um, yes, yes, it is, because that's one of the cases where you would use a filtered index. Second thing was memory dumps every 15 minutes if you have query store and parameter sensitive plan optimization turned on. So, and this isn't even the case that I was thinking about. This is there someone out there using contained availability groups? It's a good question. The people want to know. But anyhow, basically, Brent's arguing, hey, there are going to be some. He thinks that 2025 is going to get major adoption quickly, and I would agree. I think you kind of have an every other edition bump, and even though it has been almost 3 years since SQL Server, the prior version of SQL Server, we did see a good number of companies just stay on 2019. And what we're going to see, I think, is all of those companies that are on 2016 and 2017, well, that's close to end of life. Because it's close to end of life, a fair number of companies that may care about end of life. And there's, I suppose the point I'm going to make there is, why would you go to 2022 if 2025 is out? Unless there are some major issues that we find in 2025, I think that a lot of those 16, 17, 14, 12 customers are eventually going to move to 25. So told him you need security to disable regular expressions, as in prevent developers from using regex. Interesting. So why is that, Anders? Is it a performance concern? Is it? I'm trying to think if there's a security concern with regular expressions. I suppose if you write it poorly enough, I don't know if you could have a stack dump. I have PII in every database. True. Now, at the same time, if you can use a like clause, then you still have access to that data. Don't want people to easily find credit card or SSN data. All right. I would say that feels more like needing to do column level security. I suppose you could say I've got a big blob of text, and people can put whatever garbage they want in big blob of text, and so that could make it too easy. Perhaps if they can extract data, though, if you have access arbitrarily to extract data, you can just select star, get all of the data, and then run your regular expression locally. So, I don't know. That I think might be it'd be a tough sell for me, I think. Knowing that, yeah, if you can't block it out on the column level because it's just embedded in whatever text columns are available. I get the idea, but you can currently use pad index and char index and build something that's pretty similar. You probably don't have any applications that have Python embedded in them. No, all my applications are Python, but actually I did use ML services. I did have Python embedded in SQL Server in back in the day, R as well. But if you do have ML services, there are regular expression packages in Python and R, so you'd have to prevent that as well, and you'd also have to prevent any sort of broad data extraction, because again, your client can run a regular expression just as easily as a server can run it. So it's a challenge. I will readily grant you that. But I think I found a way to disable it with one of the new abilities in 2025. Well, there you go, I guess. I don't see Regex making it any easier for people to find PII, says Solomon. Yeah, I'm with you, Solomon. I think again, if you have a particular format, like a credit card number, I could use pad index and char index and do searches. It's more annoying. I think a regular expression syntax is clearer than what we have for pad index and char index, but yeah, you can still build this out. All right, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time digging through these features. You can, Solomon can a regular user. I mean, can a regular user write a regular expression? You can say, oh, you can Google it. Okay, that's fair. But you can also Google pad index and char index.
I can make an irregular one.
Mike can make irregular expressions. So I guess you got that going for you, Mike. But new Chinese collation. Performance is an issue as well. Yes, performance. Regular expressions are not going to perform better. It's basically still doing full scans of stuff, which is kind of annoying. I think they could make regular expression performance better, but just haven't spent the time doing it, which is annoying. Now, one thing that's not annoying, ODBC data sources with the Polybase and SQL Server on Linux. This is something that I have wanted since 2019 because you can't do that in containerized SQL Server. They claim it will be sargeable. They claim, they make claims. Maybe someday it'll be sargeable, but kind of annoying. This is something that I found interesting as well. Native support for specific source types. So previously, you needed Polybase to do Parquet files, Delta tables, Delta files, or CSV files. And the difficulty there was, how do I read a local Parquet file? You could fake it. You could use Minio and set up a fake S3 bucket that had your files, but it was a lot slower. You're basically you're streaming through Minio, or you could launch it up into Azure Blob Storage in a storage account. But if you just I've got a file that's running locally, and it's a Parquet file, and I just want to read that file, Polybase didn't have a great answer for you. So native support for specific source types, I like that. You no longer technically need the Polybase bits if you just want to read a Parquet file in SQL Server. And Polybase support for managed identity for connecting to Azure Blob Storage and Data Lake Storage, that's pretty solid as well. You previously had to use SAS tokens, but being able to use a managed identity is pretty neat. I think that works better if you have an Arc-enabled SQL Server instance. In fact, you might need an Arc-enabled SQL Server instance. I'm not 100% sure. Let's find out. Yep, you need an Arc-enabled SQL Server instance. Okay. It's much less neat. But TDS support, the latest version of the tabular data stream, now supported by Polybase, so that's neat. This native support, create external table as select, and open row set for Parquet, Delta, Blob Storage, Data Lake Storage, and S3. Basically, the stuff that was SQL Server 2022 Polybase is now just does not need Polybase installed. Generic ODBC, we mentioned, is pretty cool. So let's go back. I think these are probably going to be the major things that I wanted to talk about. There are obviously quite a few things that have come in. There's optimized locking. There are column store improvements around ordered column store indexes. So that's actually pretty powerful. And I think TempFS support for TempDB. Okay. Z standard backup compression algorithm. Early notes on this are it seems like it's going to be more efficient, may or may not be faster, but generally you'll have a smaller file. We'll see how that shakes out. And one of the nice things about Z Standard is that you can choose what level of compression efficiency you want. So if you are very space constrained, you can compress this down more. If you're less space constrained, you can get faster performance, less CPU utilization. So there is a nice trade-off window for it, and there are a few people who've tried various databases at different sizes around backup compression. I'll be testing the new backup compression. Might be enough for me to push for upgrade. It looked like it was pretty solid. The tests that I saw people make, the overall results, nothing was mind bending. Like it wasn't, this is an order of magnitude faster or anything like that, but it was better. So overall, I think this is going to be a pretty solid release. There's a lot in here of, hey, here's what's new. Support for Ubuntu 24.04 is in preview. This will probably come out next year, is my guess. Same thing with Red Hat. Normally, they're about 6 months behind on getting that major Linux version. And support for TLS 1.3, kind of neat. This switch to Power BI Report Server, which is the red-headed stepchild of the Power BI world. Okay. I mean, Power BI Report Server, I've used it. I still use it, unfortunately. It's not Power BI. It's like, Mom, I want Power BI, and Mom says we have Power BI at home. This is Power BI at home. And actually, literally, because this is the on-premises Power BI. This is basically SQL Server reporting services with some Power BI components, except that they're very limited, and there's a lot of stuff that is just table stakes Power BI that you can't do, like drill through, for example. That's a big one. And there are a few other things that I can think of, bookmarks, those sorts of things that it doesn't have. Power BI has it. Power BI Report Server does not have it. What Power BI Report Server does have is basically most of the capability of SQL Server reporting services, plus the widgets that you get in Power BI. But if you want a quick and dirty scheduled Excel export, the paginated reports in Power BI, they've improved, but I still think you can do better in reporting services, or at least you could do better in reporting services until now. That said, you can still use SQL Server 2022 reporting services because that was a standalone installation. So you could, depending on your licensing, have reporting services for 2022 and then database engine for 2025. For integration services, what's new? Oh, there's a thing. There actually is a thing that's new in integration services for 2025. The ADO.NET Connection Manager now supports Microsoft.SQL Client Data Provider. Wow. Cool. And that's it. Okay, you lose 32-bit mode. That's fine. The old SQL Client Data Provider, that's fine, but that's going to break a bunch of people. So you do have to migrate to ADO.NET, which hopefully they finally made it fast enough, because one of the reasons that we stuck with OLADB for so long is because that was faster than ADO.NET by far. And they got rid of the Hadoop tasks, which I remember when they came in SQL Server 2016. And I got the Hive task to work. I don't remember if I ever got the Pig task to work. The Hadoop file system task kind of worked, but not great. And I don't know anybody who ever used them. So, okay. Microsoft Connector for Oracle has been deprecated and removed. Okay. I'm sure it affects somebody. But basically, 2025, if it hasn't been obvious for the past decade, I don't think Microsoft cares about integration services. I don't think they've cared about integration services for real since about 2012. Basically, ever since Azure Data Factory v1, which they would tell you is totally different from integration services. Don't expect the same thing. It's a totally different product. And then Azure Data Factory v2 basically made Azure Data Factory a lot like integration services, because it turns out that people wanted integration services or something like that, but Microsoft wanted them in a cloud. So the last decade has been all in on Azure Data Factory and all out on integration services. I think if you go and look at what's new in integration services over the past decade, I want to scroll down to 2022 because I think the answer to 2022 was probably nothing. Yeah, literally nothing. 2019, what was new in 2019 for integration services? I'm going to start with the expectation of nothing. Oh, I'm sorry, the flexible file task. So you could perform a file operation in 3 spots, which is really 2 spots because Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 is literally Azure Blob Storage where you tick a box. It's a storage account with hierarchical file spaces. Okay, it's an option. You tick it, it's on. But flexible file source and destination, read and write data from Azure Blob Storage and Azure Data Lake Gen 2. Basically, you updated Data Lake Storage, and you basically updated the Blob Storage components to include Data Lake Storage Gen 2. That was all for 2019. And 2017, integration services, I don't remember having very much in there. Let's scroll up. Oh, look at that. Look at that. I lied. There was stuff. There was scale out in SSIS, which I never really understood very well. Granted, maybe some companies used scale out in SSIS to good effect. I've never met one. If you know somebody who has used scale out in SSIS, good for them. I don't know if I necessarily want to have a chat with that person. Not for any mean reason, just because I don't know. I don't think there was much value in it. SSIS supports Linux. That I have a video on SSIS and Linux. And the end of the video, I basically say, don't use SSIS and Linux. Didn't even know it was a feature. Don't worry, Anders. You can automatically unremember that because integration services on Linux was a joke. Half the stuff didn't work. The half of the stuff that did work was so much slower, so much worse than just running it in Windows. My end result was just run integration services in Windows, put your database engine on Linux. Don't even bother with integration services on Linux. It was junk. And hint, has not gotten better because you may have noticed they don't care. They don't care about integration services. And because they don't care, I'm not really going to care very much. All right, so that was the major update. That was a lot. There's a lot in SQL Server 2025. Next thing I want to cover, I'm just going to hit this very briefly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time like I did on integration services. Like Microsoft, I won't spend much time on integration services. So this was Ignite. A lot of stuff that came out at Ignite mostly around Microsoft Fabric. And they have intelligence layers, which I kind of need to dig into further. Fabric IQ sounds like ontology. Ontology is a big word that has been floating around in this space. Palantir, C3, a lot of companies in the, I'll call it, what do I even want to call that? Orchestration, machine learning, modern data warehousing, that confluence of different products are all talking about ontologies, semantic models, and basically how do you lay out your data? How do you explain your attributes? There's more to it than that, but That's how I'm going to explain it just off the cuff. And this is how Microsoft is playing to that space as well, where some of the major companies pushing this are talking about how, hey, you can develop your ontology, basically manage your metadata, and in our products, yeah, Palantir's copy, digital twin is another term. Yes, yeah, exactly. So they'll talk heavily about ontologies and then designing digital twins. Microsoft is they're trying to get into that same space. For Work IQ, this is actually different. This is for M365 Copilot and their AI agents, connecting to different data sources and building up some conversational context and agent development. Foundry IQ, Azure AI Foundry was renamed to Microsoft Foundry, and they have this Foundry IQ, which is managed knowledge system. So again, kind of building on the concepts that you have with ontologies, but basically tying together, where do I find this relevant information? Somebody is asking a question about blah. Where do I find blah? A lot of Ignite was copilots and AI-based stuff, generative AI stuff. I won't get into that very much. I'll keep scrolling down. Copilot, copilots, Microsoft Foundry, which is generative AI. Azure Data Center, exciting innovations. So a host of Azure and data center related advancements. Supercomputing, AI supercomputing clusters. Azure Model Router for multi-model orchestration. Next generation data centers featuring liquid cooling and energy efficient hardware. Okay, neat, but that's what this site had. So Ignite. Ignite had a big book of news, and there was a lot of information in there. If you look at the releases, I think Adam Saxton had the Fabric announcements for November, and it was a long list. So if I pull it up on curatedSQL.com,
bookmark it now.
A website, one of many websites on the internet, but I even noted Adam Saxton has a long list. So this was on the 19th. This was right at Ignite. Adam posted this on the 18th, but as I zoom through here, and we'll drop in a link, pasting and chatting. Gotta click the button. There we go. Excitement. That was all very exciting, I'm sure, waiting for me to click the button. But just scrolling through, this is the contents. This is the table of contents. As I scroll through, we're on like page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Basically 5 pages of table of contents. A lot of this is generally available stuff. Some of this is in preview. And some of it I care about a lot. Some of it I don't care about at all. But just the general idea that they've been pretty busy on Fabric, which is good because they've kind of needed to be. This is getting closer to ready for prime time. I'm thinking that probably around build of next year, I could reasonably tell a customer, yeah, Fabric seems like a good option. It's getting close. Much closer than it was a year ago. So, it's getting there. All right. Real quick on past summit. Mike and I did not go. Mala did not go. Tracy did go, but she's not here today. So, she's not going to be able to share her thoughts. I don't know, Anders, I think you might have gone, but if anybody did go to past summit, if you have any thoughts on it. You did. Excellent. Yeah, if you have any thoughts you want to share away. And in the meantime, I'm going to let you all in on some secret news. Secret news based off of secret communications much smaller than in previous years. I got that feeling as well from chatting with a couple of people. Going down to 3 days next year. Oh, interesting. Is that so? 3 days including pre-cons? Because that would imply, I think, yeah, one pre-con day plus 2 regular days. Interesting. Yeah, that's knowing that the Europeans would always leave Friday morning, and so Friday afternoon was essentially a lost day for most people anyhow. I can I can get behind that. 2 days of pre-cons is a lot. You by the end of day 2 of pre-cons, your head's spinning. But unfortunately, that also, I think, gives you a feeling for how interesting the uh, pre-con content is at the moment. That you only have so many people who can draw enough of a crowd to make a pre-con worthwhile, and that's if to the extent that that is a reason for going down to 1 day for pre-cons, that's unfortunate. Um, little bit painful, but that said, there were a lot of good pre-cons, but yeah. So, um, even so, I will say that when I was there and I did 2 pre-cons, that second pre-con was hard. Um, your head's just filled with knowledge by the middle of the day, and it can be tough. Um, but I'm sure it's also a lot cheaper for Redgate and for Pass to put on a 3-day summit instead of a 5-day summit. It'll be interesting to see if there's again overlap with Live 360. How else would I get exposed to the product group except for pre-cons? Yeah. Although it sounded like there was more Microsoft representation this year than there was last year. I don't know if there was as much as before. I don't know if Cat was there, SQL Cat or Azure Cat or whoever Cat there was. Okay, good. Because I know I believe they were not there last year, and that was a pretty big deal. That basically Microsoft didn't send people. Microsoft people who attended essentially went on their own. They went on their own. They got their own separate approval or went on their own dime. And this year, it sounded like Microsoft was sending people, which is good. I mean, I want Pass Summit to succeed. I have not been to Pass Summit in a while, maybe next year, but I do want it to succeed. I think it is still the biggest conference around SQL Server, and I mean, SQL Server I think it's a mature product for sure. So it's not going to have the excitement that it did 15 years ago. But even so, I like having that. I was thinking of Peter Gabriel when I saw PG. Parental guidance. SQL bits might be gaining on Summit. Probably. If anything, bits might be larger than Summit, given the size that you mentioned. Historically, that was not the case, but knowing that bits has grown significantly and has sort of become the major conference in Europe. SQL conference is in Poland SQL Days is in Poland. SQL Conference is in Germany. But those two, I've not been in person for either one, but I don't think either one is as large as Bits. They're pretty big conferences as well, and they're in their own rights. Would love to go to one or both of them at some point. I did SQL Day remotely. That was one of the COVID years where they actually had you as a virtual avatar in a Second Life style world, and it was a little bit weird, janky, because they had you pre-record all of the content, and then they would essentially play the movie file, and you were sitting there in the audience listening to yourself speak and then answering questions in chat from people. So I don't think that was a great experience. I give them credit for trying. I think that was at a time when people were trying to come up with innovative ways of integrating virtual content, and it was definitely an innovative way. It just, a lot of people had problems with the client. It took a lot of effort to get set up, and I think that may have detracted from some of its value. So, anyhow, secret information that only Mike and I know. Mala and Tracy also know. SQL Saturday Raleigh 2026. Is it okay if we announce the provisional date, Mike?
I can tell you right now that it can't. As of right now, it cannot. Yes, it's totally fine to bring it up. I think the 24th can't happen. So
No, we're going to do the 18th. So Saturday, April 18th, 2026
yeah,
is the date that we're looking for SQL Saturday Raleigh.
okay. Because I checked out 11, 18, and 25. Let me double check 18 while I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah, the 25th we're not doing because SQL Bits is actually the weekend of the 25th. That's their free Saturday. The 18th is a week after SQL Saturday Richmond, and is the same day as CQL Saturday, which is outside of Denmark, as I recall. Or is it the Netherlands? Yeah, this is Dutch. Okay, so, oh yeah, here we go, Zeeland. All right, so no, it is not Denmark. It is in fact the Netherlands. But yeah, kind of in this area right here. Assume that I'm not going to that because we're going to be hosting ours right at that time slot. So it's 1 week after Richmond. It's a couple weeks after Atlanta. So this southeastern region, we're going to have our spring sessions, assuming again that nothing catastrophic happens where Mike says we can't have the building on April 18th. We're doing it live. We're learning things live, everybody. But it also slots in prior to Jacksonville, knowing that SQL Bits is the 25th. That's not a day that we want to pick. Not necessarily because of we're going to have massive attendee overlap, but there's going to be some speaker overlap. There are a lot of people who do go to Bits, fly to Bits from the U.S., and it'd be nice to have a few of those. There are flights from Raleigh to London, just letting people know. Same venue as last year. Yes, we're going to have the same venue. We are going to work out a few of the logistical kinks that we learned about as along the way. So we'll have things move smoother than last year, I think, but it will be the same venue. So we're not going to officially announce it until we've got things, calendar invitations set. We've got buildings officially booked and everything, but wanted to let everyone know we are at work on SQL Saturday Raleigh 2026. It will again be in Durham, and basically that's the plan. As I get more locked down, or really Mike's doing most of the locking down, but as Mike locks things down, assuming that all works well, we'll be able to determine, can we host a pre-con? That's currently in the air. Maybe yes, maybe no. And making sure that we can get rooms for that Saturday. Similar things would apply as last year, where we might have to put up some signs, have some people go specific places, shape out appropriate size rooms, and know that, well, we can't go here. Please be quiet in this area because there are nurses working, that kind of stuff. But all that said, that's the angle. That's what we're aiming for. So that's the plan. Last thing we're going to talk about, because I've only got a minute or two left, is what's left for SQL for TriPass this year. On the 9th, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, parameter sniffing in SQL. So this is our last advanced DBA group of the year. Torsten Strauss is going to speak with us again, talking about parameter sniffing in SQL Server. Some of the pros, cons, goods, and bads behind it, as well as how to deal with problems that you might find with parameter sniffing. And finally, last in-person meeting of the year, cloud and hybrid SQL architectures. For this one, If I scroll down, our speaker is Rajesh Vyala. And so that one's in person. That one's at Tech Systems. We're going to have that. We have some provisional stuff. Again, I'm going to let you all in on the secret. The plan is next year, we are going to make Advanced DBA happen every second month. So we're cutting the number of Advanced DBA sessions in half, but we're also going to try to make it more 400 level content. So the goal is not as many sessions, but try to focus more on depth and then bring some of the 200, 300 content back to the main meeting. So that's what we're going to do. For now, we're going to have data science, business intelligence, artificial intelligence, all of that jazz. Still will go January through October. Advanced DBA will be February, then April, and so on. That way we skip November. Regular meetings are in person only. Yes, the main meeting will still be in person only. We did talk about potential for hybrid, but as of right now, we're still going to keep that in person only. I might switch that up sometime mid-year or sometime during the year, but at the moment, that's the plan. So again, I'll send out a TriPass news and notes once we have things official, but figured this is Shop Talk. We can leak information on Shop Talk, leak information that only the true insiders will know about. And congratulations, you're all true insiders now. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to wrap things up for the evening. So it's good seeing everybody. Reporting you to leadership. Yeah, you probably should. Those people. Leadership doesn't like me very much. TriPass leadership is constantly trying to overthrow me. That's why you don't see Mala and Tracy here, is because I had to put down another coup. So with that, we're going to wrap things up for tonight. Again, Advanced DBA meeting next Tuesday, not tomorrow. And until we do see each other at Advanced DBA meeting, at the main meeting, or Shop Talk, or whenever, everybody, take care.